Hello and welcome to what we are still calling part of the dive, so we can still use our pretty graphics. Our podcast with me, Kobe, and Kien Lamb from his 10 Thoughts that he posts every week on Lowell Esports. Good morning, my friend. How you doing?
Morning to you as well. I am doing very well. How are you? How have you been? I just got to watch you eat breakfast. So I was very jealous. I haven't
Yeah,
eaten yet.
we've got a rush schedule today as well, so I had to quickly cook some eggs, get them in here, and give you a little mukbang. Is that what it's called?
Yeah. That's the secret like top tier. If you are gold subscription members, make sure you subscribe. You will
Yeah.
get the secret mukbang stream with Kobe.
So far, only Keen is a gold subscriber to me, so he's the only one who got to see it.
Yeah. I got to get in my level.
Yeah. I mean, as far as how we're doing this morning, I would also have to say that we are both probably doing better than Zaboutine and Keaton. As we just saw last night, the Immortals news came out about them being released. And from the tweets that he put out today, Zaboutine actually just today did an English tweet, talked about still being a little bit in shock. And so it seems like it moved very quickly.
Yeah, that was a very surprising thing, and it's one of those things where it's like I feel like you see this happen in sports a lot. The one most famous one I remember was Phoenix Suns fired their coach. I want to say I'm not going to guess his name because somebody's going to flame me for like, oh, how do you not remember this guy's name from a couple of years ago? But basically, they lost I think the first two games of the season. It was like a 50-point loss and then like a 40-point loss, just something insane like that where they just got clobbered. And they immediately fired him. And this was like they had voiced like, oh yeah, we're definitely. We're an organization, we're a family, we're in this together. Couple games out, boom, you're fired. This happens a lot. Yeah. and so that's kind of what's happening here, right? Is IMT had, let's be like, no sugarcoating it, it's completely awful start to the season. Very little silver lining whatsoever in the start of the year. Turn around, fired them. I think maybe mixed feelings about this. I'm curious from your perspective. You've been around for a while. We've both been around for a while. How do you feel about like these midseason? I think it's one thing for like a midseason roster change. Everybody's kind of like, oh yeah, that happens. But like, what does a midseason coach GM change actually mean?
Yeah, the first thing that jumps out is that the people who are paying for it are very unhappy with the results and with the social following even of what's gone on with this team recently. I know people have been just slamming Immortals, Zaboutine, Aka, all of the players, not just Aka, by the way, for a long time. And there have been a bunch of topics that have come up surrounding that. So that's the first thing. It's like, okay, so the sponsors and the people paying for this are clearly unhappy. And like you're saying, I know this happens so frequently in traditional sports where it's very easy to be like, all right, or we're replacing our coach, so that means that there's all of a sudden going to be a lot of internal changes and a lot of kind of magical fixes. I don't think that is possible in this scenario, or is really feasible in esports, because we have a really hard time replacing coaching talent. There is very, very little coaching talent. They're having to take casters, by God, with Jat, and even Zaboutine himself, before he was a coach, was a French caster. And if people don't know, some of his backstory, that's why even when Zaboutine was hired by Romain at the beginning of this, before Romain moved on, there was a lot of skepticism as far as even like, oh my God, they're taking this French caster to become the coach of the team. So I think there's just been doubt literally along the way. And the problem that they're facing, of course, is that it's very difficult to replace this talent. But it got to a point where they're just like, we are dead last. Both of our teams are on fire, our academy roster as well as our LCS roster. So they just had enough. And even without really strong replacements ready, they're just cleaning house to try and send that message, I think, to fans of like, we are also not okay with the state of the org.
I mean, how do you even begin this search? It's not like they're waking up this morning and like calling Jat and be like, "Hey, buddy, do you know anyone?" You know, it's like calling Avali is like, "Hey, you know, you looking for a new gig here?" You know, it's like one of these things where it's like there isn't like you can't just go on like Indeed or LinkedIn and be like LCS coach and look through resumes, right?
Exactly.
Like I guess, and you've talked about how people have talked to you in the past. I guess I'm wondering, what do you like? What are qualities you would even look like? Like a coach is one thing, but then like a coach, you just find somebody, okay, somebody who's, you know, they're knowledgeable about the game, they know how to do pick draft, and then GM's like another responsibility altogether, and they kind of get lumped together. Like, what do you even like look for? What are qualities that would like, like what would make for a good coach to you?
I think it's really funny because this brings up a very old and reused meme that even when I graduated college was used, and it's always something where, okay, I am fresh into the workforce. How do I get a job? Well, you need to have experience and build a resume. And you're like, wow, that makes a lot of sense. You know, I had to display some skills, and I'll be able to put those on my resume. All right, how do I get the experience to put on my resume? Well, you're going to need some experience, my friend. And that's one of the things with esports and specifically League of Legends coaching being such an open ground and such a new field that very few people have experience, and those that do still have their jobs. And are not looking in a lot of cases to move around. So you have to get so much more creative. And to your point of like the skills that you're actually looking for, you can't just do the easy route and be like, all right, well, they already did this job somewhere else because they haven't done it somewhere else. So you have to look at the actual personality traits and skills that you want to, and then inject them into the scene. For coaching specifically, of course, everybody's going to go to pro players. That is the most logical transition because you know the game the closest. You have a really good understanding of the strategy. Plus, you get the added benefit of bringing in a certain amount of respect from the players. This is something that's been talked about so often. Professional players who got to the top, like, how are you supposed to take, especially positional coaches and stuff like that, how are you supposed to take strategy advice from someone sitting in gold or platinum, right? So I think the coaching one specifically has a very heavy tie to previous professional experience, and a lot of the most successful coaches do have that. Some don't, like Koma, for example, for SKT, but he's more of a top down, higher up coach. And then you get into GM territory where you're looking more at people management, conflict resolution, communication skills.
GMs also includes, I think, that general roster building thing, which at this point I think is very difficult for IMT. It's not like people are always like, why don't we just get fresh NA talent in? And I think if it was just that easy, like somebody surely would have done it by now.
I think there's a middle ground here because while I totally agree with you, and it's not easy, you got to think, all right, look at Cloud9. They had nobody that had ever won the LCS before. Where did Blabber come from? How does Cloud9 and Jack seem to find so many young, talented players and then be able to trade them all off? So I feel like, yes, it is not easy. Yes, we have a smaller population, but I feel like most organizations should be doing more. Tactical and Blabber, two players from two different teams, I think good examples of North American talent finding success.
So when you are looking for these players, and let's use Cloud9 for example, like when they put the team together, was it a matter of them saying, okay, we know that Niski plays X style and we think that's going to work really well with Blabber who plays Y style. And then in order for this XY style in mid jungle to work out, we're going to need this AB style from bot lane. Is that like a thing that goes into conversation, or is it just a matter of like, okay, we know this guy's good, this guy's good, this guy's good? Like, because it feels like sometimes when you see these super teams, for example, people take good players and slap on a team, and then there's zero synergy and they fail. So I'm like, when you're building, like, because they're looking for a new GM, they got to come in, they got to look at this roster and figure out how do we make this work. And to me, it feels like you need to understand again what synergies work best, what kind of player works best with another kind of player, and in that case, then if you're coming into this roster, are there pieces that you feel like, okay, I know Soaz is this kind of player. Here's the type of talent I need to surround him with. I know Aka is this kind of player. Maybe he looks bad now because he hasn't been surrounded with the right style of players. And so I'm curious for you. I'm gonna you're for the sake of this conversation. I'm IMT. You're the guy I'm thinking of hiring. You're coming in. What pieces are you looking to put together to kind of save the situation, or not even save, but make a good situation here?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because, and we can just kind of go into, because I've actually thought about this a lot in, talking to teams, and it's always fun to think about how you would build it out if you actually made that transition. For me, it's a multi-layered process where the first step is finding, like you're saying, okay, this player is a prospect. This player has talent. And you need to, using Cloud9 as another great example, because they're so successful at it. You go through and you think about, oh yeah, they also had contracts. That was another super promising jungler that they were building up and had a lot of talent, and yet traded away. And so you have to gather a decent number, and you have to use your academy team especially, and go even deeper than the academy team. Like, you cast a decently wide net to find these talented players that you keep your eye on. And then you do your next step of, once they are on your team, in your incubation system, whatever it is, whether it's academy, whether it's another system, then you have the time to profile them and have basically psychological profiles of the players, so you can find out or mold what type of player you want them to be, what type of player they are. I don't think that players should be pushed too far away from what their natural tendency that allowed them to climb high in the ladder and get scouted should be. So that to me is is the stage that Immortals are like, oh man, we're at stage 2 already, where we have these two sets of rosters, and we need to find alignment here to get one to perform on the LCS stage. But especially with COVID, you can't go back and then do stage 1 again and try and find more pieces. That's why at the beginning of the split, when they announced this shuffle around, and when teams started to get on the oh yeah, we're a 10-man roster, we're gonna figure out best. I'm always very skeptical, and I feel like those things are symptoms and indicators of deeper problems that they have struggled with in the off season. So I know that they are getting a lot of flame, the players as well as Zaboutine. I can be empathetic with a difficult situation that they are in now. You can say, yes, they should have done more and better work previously to set themselves up for more success. But currently, it is a very difficult situation, and people are just thinking, okay, how can we slap something in there to get them out of 10th? And the thing that people are going to go with is what they know. All right, get Smithy back in there. Apollo, Hakuho, sign Golden Glue or something. What is available right now that may not be peak, but can get you some sort of baseline. And I think that might have to be what the short-term solution is, and what I would even recommend. Because while I'm a big proponent of signing new talent, finding new North American talent, having this updraft of just in the time frame, I think that's extremely difficult.
Yeah, I mean, I think the optimistic way, when you see somebody announce, we have a 10-man roster, the optimistic way of looking at it is, oh, wow, they have a lot of talent to work with. I think the more pragmatic way of looking at it, though, is, oh, they don't have a 5-man roster that they're confident in. And I think that's, I talked about this a little bit in some thoughts at the beginning when I saw Dignitas and both Immortal do this. And I think you're seeing the repercussions of that is, it's not that they have this exciting new 10-man strategy. It's because it's not a 20-minute mark hits and it's like, oh, yeah, DeMonte, he's tired. He needs a breather. We're subbing Golden Glue in the middle of the game. That's not how League of Legends works. You play the full game, and then the next game you either play or you don't play. And to me, it's always a matter of like, okay, like there's one guy that's just gonna be better. You can't sub people in after the draft. There's no like specific scenarios you could set up, right? And so it's just you either have this 5-man roster that you are comfortable with, or you don't. And sometimes it's like 6-man roster, like at Worlds, when you face a different team, you're like, okay, I know for this specific series, this player just matches up better in this lane. And so like whenever I see these things, I'm always kind of like, this is the team I don't have much confidence in them. It's not a good thing. Like for example, for any of us that have any sort of pride in our own ability to play, and I would imagine at the highest levels, pro players have more pride than anybody else. You would never in any situation sit there and be like, oh yeah, you should definitely sub this guy in for me. Like they're definitely better than me at this champion. You would never think that. Like I don't know any single pro who would once think that, right? Like who sits like you're playing solo queue, for example. Like you sit there and some other guy says, "Oh, I'm a jungle main too." There should never be a part of you that's like, "Oh yeah, this guy's better than me. I should let him have it," unless it's like a Smurf or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. And even then, part of you is like, like especially you're high diamond. You have to have some pride in your skill.
When people do that to you in Champ Select, and they're like, "Oh, I'm a Smurf," then I'm like, "All right, give me your main accounts and show me the data." And if they are, then I'll be like, "Okay, you know what? Yeah. I will play some Blitzcrank support or something. Yeah. Go ahead and carry me. I will swallow my pride as a jungler."
You'll PGG them. They're like 31-2. It's like, all right, I'll take this.
Because usually, people will throw that out, and you look at it and you're like, you are a 51% win rate. Got this Smurf issue going on here. Yeah. But if you check it out, I'm at least okay with it. Like, okay, you know what? Let's take the wheel, see if you can carry me. Of course, then you are justified in being very angry if afterwards you're like, well, yes, I was feeding on my auto-filled role, but you're supposed to carry my ass.
Yeah, because I went 0-9 doesn't mean we should have lost, right? So when you are, if we go back to this real quick, the thing I'm curious about then is we talked about this roster building thing. As a mid laner, I would never, for example, start building a roster with a support player or with a top player. Like I think both are important roles, but I would never build my team around them. I can't actually even think of a good example of maybe support. You can argue a few players have kind of been the focal points of their team, like Core JJ, maybe Mata back in 2014. But top lane, I think, has been a very rare role for a team to be like, we are pivoting everything around top. Like even on like IG with the Shy, like to me, Rookie was always the fulcrum of that team and not really the Shy. And so for you, if you were to start building a team, like, is there a role, or maybe it's a combination?
I don't even have to let you finish. I mean, it has to be mid for me. My secondary would be jungle.
Yeah. So you build that synergy first, and so I guess the point I'm trying to get here with this is I think most people would agree it's the mid jungle. Like that's where if you had to start from like a fantasy draft perspective, it's always the mid jungles have higher priority. If we were to do this and look at IMT situation with Aka, and I know he's been like under a lot of heat from all sorts of angles, some of it justified, some of it maybe not justified. If you had to look at Aka and I tell you, okay, we're keeping him. There's nobody else that we can go for. Because if you're in a situation where, and I think Golden Glue is a solid player, I think he could have a spot in the LCS. But if you are in a situation where you're saying, okay, we need Golden Glue to come save our season, that is not a good situation to be in. Mm-hmm. All right. And so you have Ika here. What about him do you feel like is good? Because you talked about like, hey, what helped them climb to the ladder? What would you say are things that Ika is good at? And if we were to start there, or maybe not even good, but things that he is fine at, how would you build around that?
Here's what I would do, like in this scenario where you have to keep him. And first of all, disclaimer to your point earlier, like I think the flame that he has gotten over the years is definitely getting excessive. Mm-hmm. He even tweeted out like this is starting to get on the edge of bullying, and I can be very empathetic, and I know how difficult it is to be on a bottom team. Like it's insane social pressure. That being said, still going to critique his play and
Yes.
stats and what's going on within the LCS. Currently, he does have the lowest KDA of any mid laner. That goes along with being on one of the worst teams. You also are going to die a lot. One of the surprising things to me was, even in the very short, small sample size, he has a positive CSD at 10. And I've started doing CSD at 10 instead of 15 because towers, turret plates go down a bit before that and things start moving around. But I think 10 is pretty good for lane phase. It's not, extremely big, but it's on top half, right? He's got a +4 CSD at 10 currently. And after watching some of his LCS games, I can't speak to what got him to the top of the ladder because honestly, he started as a pro player like 6-7 years ago. He was played in EU for a very long time. Then he played in the National French League. So he's actually a veteran of the scene. But from what I've seen in LCS, his Yasuo game versus Niski, made some risky choices in melee matchup, which got him punished very heavily. And in some of the games where you're looking to put him on like a more aggressive mid laner, I think there are too many opportunities to make mistakes there. So I would put him on one of the in meta longer range scaling AP threats from mid lane, so that you don't have to put extra pressure in your game plan, in your win conditions, on playing off of something like that. That's not to say that this is the best way to win the game. I do not think that it is currently. I am firmly in the boat of the Cloud9 camp, and the do and be style, roaming early, high pressure mid with your jungle. But that is what I would do given the pieces. If you're giving these restrictions, and try to build simplistic composition, late game scaling mage for mid, scaling bottom. Aphelios is the number one go-to. There are teams in the LCS doing this right now. They have Ornn Trundle frontline, and you have double scaling DPS for the backline. You try and get to the point where you 5-on-5 around objectives. Not the most exciting, and probably not the most cutting edge, but that's kind of the default I see when you see restrictions like that.
So this is actually a great segue for the next thing I want to talk about. Then is speaking of outdated type of things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna throw at you what I'm gonna call the boomer index.
I like it already.
All the Twitch memers out there, making fun of us for being boomers just because we have slower APM. We can't type 190 words per minute. They're out there playing Valorant and slamming us with their Twitch reflexes, little Zoomer babies. Us boomers, however,
I'm just holding the angle here, just hoping I can click the button.
Yeah, it's like you see the screen come fast, you click it 2 seconds later. The Zoomer's just looking at you like wow, dude, like what kind of environment did you grow up in? It's like, times were tough, my kids. All right. So I'm going to call it the boomer index. I'm going to throw a couple things at you. You can go from 1 to 10, with 10 being boomer. I don't think 1 is necessarily zoomer because I don't think they're opposites by nature, but I do think 10 being boomer, boomer being kind of old, a little outdated, slow to adapt. Doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. I think there are plenty of things that could benefit from being a little more boomer. In this case,
respect your elders. You go wise with age.
Right. So the first thing I'm going to throw to you is, I think, segueing from Aika's play style right into Froggen is, you talked about low CSD numbers. I saw that our stats team actually shared a lot of good numbers with us last night about Froggen's numbers are actually pretty awful this split. And it's one of the first splits where they've actually been awful. Froggen, however, has not been very successful in NA in terms of winning games. Like, he's had individual splits and performances where he individually was good, but they don't translate to wins. So on the boomer index, the first thing I'm going to throw at you is, where do you put Froggen's play style?
It's interesting because I would definitely put it higher up on the boomer scale, because he does, he built his name on power farming, getting the highest CS I can't remember his Karthus record, but it was back when mid
Yes.
laners would power farm their mid lane. He would go farm his Raptors. He would
Yes.
also go farm the enemy's Raptors, which takes communication with your jungler. And he is very good at manipulating the minion wave. So
Mhm.
I think that these are really important skills, and it should be a good baseline. One of the main things that comes up when I talk to players today, LCS players, academy players, just even high rated people in solo queue about him, is the champion choice. Because still to this day, Froggen plays a lot of like Bel'Kaz, the Anivia, a lot of these off meta, weirder
Yeah.
mid lane champions that have some other things in common. Like Bel'Kaz has some very big strengths that I, especially as like someone who just loves theory crafting, I'm like, all right, well, why isn't it meta? With double W, you can instantly clear waves. Okay, well, your question's answered pretty quickly because it's low mobility. It's not safe. You can gank it very effectively. And the meta right now is about mid laners gaining priority, roaming, or even being able to roam, giving up a minion wave. And to me, that just like clashes with Froggen's soul of like giving up minion waves to go roam. Like he built his career on out CSing people and smashing people in 1v1 in lane. I still think he's extremely good in lane, but as far as your boomer rating, I would definitely put it up there. And it might be another case of your previous question of like, all right, trying to build a team fully around that style, even if that style right now I don't think is the optimal style, you could get the most out of like that configuration of pieces.
So when you're building a team around him, do you see a world like, even if we go back historically, can you think of a team that played the game suboptimally, but they were so good at that suboptimal style? Like relative to what the meta was, because if you were to focus on mid lane Froggen and say this, we're going to let him scale and farm, we're going to play this slow, we're going to support him because like he's still effective with resources generally when you give him fights or whatever. Has there historically been like a team that fits that mold?
There are definitely teams that I would say maybe I call them meta proof.
Yes.
I would say that RNG with Uzi, meta proof, because that's something where, and I've even talked about it before, where no matter what year it is, no matter what's going on, no matter how much AD carries are complaining about how weak the role is, if I see RNG, I see Uzi on there, I'm like, I know exactly what style they should be playing and what style they will play, and I'm fully confident in that because he's at that level. But like that, it's definitely an extreme, and I'm cherry picking a super extreme because Uzi, one of the best, if not the best, AD carry player mechanics of all time. So. But that's definitely one that jumps out to me because I'm like, oh yeah, you know what? Meta proof. I don't really care what's going on. I always want to see them try that style, and maybe that's your test as well. Like how suboptimal is this style really?
Yeah,
because they're the best example of it.
I mean, it's always just funny because you would see them, they would lock it in, and if they lost, people were like, oh, RNG is so outdated. And then they would just lock it in the next game, they would win, and then the comments would completely flip and be like, oh my God, Uzi's so good. It was just like, it's kind of a weird situation to be in because I think the team, they know it's not the most optimal way to play it, but they still, like, that's just the pieces we have, right? And I feel like this is a thing that teams just need to do more often is, yes, this is how Cloud9 plays the game. Yes, that's how it optimally should be played. But like I have Froggen, I have Xmithy, I don't have Niski Blabber. I can't play that style. So in that case, at a certain point, you just kind of have to lean into who your players are, right? That or you change out players. So it's like one of these things. You kind of just, if you have a spear, you just have to kind of sharpen it, and you have to work the spear. You can't just randomly be like, I'm gonna throw my spear like a bow and arrow because then you don't have a spear anymore.
You got a really long arrow. I've got something for you then, because as a little exercise, when I've been talking about the styles of teams, I actually went through and tried to do a little bit of classification for what we have in the LCS right now.
Yes.
Because my dream scenario, and this is selfish as a viewer, as someone who wants North America as a region to strengthen themselves, like the teams to steel sharpen steel. I would try and force the teams to embrace these different classifications. You said it's so rare for example, for a team to be built around top lane, but given the pieces of 100 Thieves, I would say, you know what, run with it and really be the team to try and test those limits and try and prove that is super suboptimal. Like everybody's pretty much agreed, but and it's selfish again because maybe they can get a 1 or 2 extra wins if they have him on Ornn like they tried at the beginning and they do the 5-5 front to back. But it's so much more exciting if we have these different characters in our league, these different identities. I'm like, all right, so you guys do that. Even more simplistically though, there seems to be a split. There's some old guard boomer scale maybe for your scale of the slower Team Liquid style, I would say, from previous iterations where they were also built around Jensen and Doublelift. And Doublelift even said this in an interview where he's like, yeah, we're trying stuff, but we know if we want to win, me and Jensen on scaling carries and get some frontline in front of us. You got some tanks for impact in the jungle, right? And everyone was aligned on that. I feel like right now I would put FlyQuest at least partially in that as well. They have shown some more aggressive tendencies, but Power of Evil is another extremely potent, like scaling damage per minute focused, mage player. He has done a good job of diversifying himself, but I would still like, for sake of classification, put FlyQuest in this kind of slower thought. Whereas the new school, led by Cloud9 and led by Cloud9's success, seems like everyone's now trying to chase that. And we're like, oh man, the best team in the whole league used to be Team Liquid. Maybe we should all try and do this slower 5v5 style. Now Cloud9 is like sparking interest.
Yeah.
And so you got Golden Guardians picking up Damonte and saying, hey, we're going to do that too. Damonte's a roaming mid laner. Closer's a super powerful jungler. Run wild. And I think that's cool. So I want, more teams to like embrace these styles. EG, one of the more aggressive teams, really embracing Jizuke's love for split pushing. Yeah. So we have like 1-3-1 teams. We have the Cloud9 followers, and we still have some of the Fortress style built up slower teams too.
I think all those Fortress style teams are basically going to be left behind eventually. Like maybe not this split. Like I think FlyQuest is going to be fine this split, but I think eventually they will be left behind
or change or adapt
or they change, right? But very rarely have we seen these Fortress teams successfully adapt. I think SKT is a prime example of an old Fortress team that has taken some time to slowly adapt in the last few years, and they're kind of going through. It's kind of weird to say they're going through a rough patch. It's like, oh, they only made semifinals last year. They only won LCK like 3 times. I think it's a tough transition, but I am glad. Like I thought your 100 Thieves point was good. Like I personally like going like when he locks in Ornn or any other tank in top lane, and I'm watching 100 Thieves games, I feel kind of cheated. It's like you're going to watch the whole Harlem Globetrotters, and they play like standard 5-on-5 basketball. There's no tricks, no nothing. It just feels like I'm being cheated out of an experience that I could otherwise have.
And then even in their game versus Cloud9 versus Licorice, some days up there on Ornn, he blows Licorice's flash as Ornn versus Gangplank, and you're like, man, I wish he was on Fiora or Kale or something. I would get excited, but it's not going to lead to the kind of arcs that you want to. I really like that you're bringing up the LCK too, because them as a region have had to make this whole movement and whole effort that Cloud Templar and all of their casters and all of their teams have spoken out about multiple times after their very public and worldwide kind of collapse of 2018 when everything came crashing down and the new generation of of teams came through of playing more aggressively and trying to force mistakes. It caused a shift in the LCK, and even most recently Nuguri gave an interview where he's talking about it too, why LCK teams are more embracing the LPL aggression. Not all LPL teams are playing the same, but with the success back-to-back years of this region, now finally people are kind of jumping on that train too. And as like our microcosm of NA is a similar thing of like, oh, the Team Liquid old guard of LCK used to always win everything, is kind of like Cloud9 are the new LPL of North America coming in and showing teams the light.
So, which team or which region would you put higher on the Boomer Index, the LCK or the LCS?
Yeah, because LC. Oh, well, I have to put LCS the highest on the Boomer Index simply because I saw the Reddit thread that was like, we are 2 years older on average than every other league, and all the other ones are like maybe a few months apart as far as their average age, and then we're like, woo, we jump way up here, and that opens up the whole book of our player churn, our turnover rate, what's being valued, and creating new teams.
It's the famous Boomer gap between the ages of 21 and 23. When 21 in America, you start drinking, and that's your that's the descent to Boomer madness right there. It's just 2 years. That's any of you kids sitting there at 21 right now, give yourselves 2 more years before you're sitting at like on your patios drinking tea in the middle of the day or whatever it is boomers do.
We talked about it on the dive too, with like a little bit more in-depth kind of interesting conversation, and we were like, several points came up around like not necessarily tying it to age, because as much as people meme on it, you don't actually lose physical reaction speed. Like, we have science behind it.
Yes.
In your 20s. And of course, then you open up the whole conversation about stability and it becoming long living careers. I mean, you've got fighting game players winning Evo 30 somethings, and
but all the Zoomers like, oh wow, you really lost reaction speed as you got older. I was like, no, I've just always had kind of bad reaction speed, if we're gonna be honest with you there.
That's me.
Yeah. So another one I'm gonna throw on the Boomer Index, speaking of players like kind of old stuff, we saw Don't Mash Me or Mash Now come back to the LCS. Those of you who don't know, the first ever LCS finals back in 2013 spring featured Wild Turtle on TSM and Mash on GGU, Good Game University. So Mash is not new talent. Like, anybody who's like, oh, excited, oh, who's this Mash guy? New talent. He's been around for a while. Seeing Mash back in the LCS, where does that fit on the Boomer Index for you?
I mean, that's definitely pretty high. Like you're saying, he's been in the scene for so long that it's not a new spark or anything. So yeah, that's probably about an 8 or 9. I wouldn't necessarily, to your earlier point, label something that's highly Boomer as highly negative, though. Because this brings up the question that so many people have gone back and forth on. Okay, are we really just overvaluing all of the older players that have fans with them and older players that are proven values? Why are we not digging for new talent? And that is put right next to, okay, we put in this new talent and they're bad, get rid of them. Bring back Smithy, stuff like that. So it's definitely a shades of gray topic, where I think you do need to dig for the new talent, but you also and give them a decent amount of time, but you also have to have a cutoff point. And so it's hard to balance what you want with your guaranteed results for right now. And that's why I think it is a multi-layer process, and you kind of have to be doing 2 sections at once. As for Mash specifically in this instance, I mean, him and Wild Turtle are like trading time. I know that they've talked about they really like how Mash's communication has developed, and that's one of the skills that does develop the longer you're in it. So he's had a good work ethic. He's put his work in the scene, stayed in academy, tried coaching, all these different things, and that's one of the benefits that you can get from it, even though you're probably not going to be surprised by some crazy new play that he does.
Yeah. I think there's this misnomer where people are always saying, well, you should bring in the hungry rookies. They have much more appetite for this than older players, and I don't think that's true. I think definitely there are cases where older players get complacent as they get older. I think that might be more frequent even, but I also know plenty of older players. Golden Glue being a great example. We see Mash come back in now. You talk about Doublelift's desire to win worlds, maybe stronger than ever. A lot of these old guys, like Afromu, another guy, people like, oh, he's washed up or whatever. I don't actually buy that because I feel like Afro is an example of somebody who could go off and I feel like have a really strong streaming career if he was just quote unquote in it for the paycheck. Like newsflash to any of you who did not see how much Ninja and Shroud made on Mixer, there is a lot more money on the streaming side of things right now. And Afromove, again, those of you who don't know, was a really like a fantastic streamer back in the day. If he really wanted to make a streaming career, I feel like he could go off and be very successful at that. So I don't buy the whole like they're just here for paychecks thing. I think a lot of old players have maybe more desire, or if not more desire, a more focused desire on what they want out of being a pro player. Like they have very specific goals because they've failed over and over and over, and they know the types of things they don't want, which helps them get to the point of like really being clear in what they do want. Whereas a lot of rookie players come in and you ask them, okay, what do you expect? Most of them just kind of, they shrug, they don't know anything. They don't know anything. They don't know what the heck they want. They just want to go on stage and look good. But they don't understand. I don't think you can really want something until you've lost the chance to get it. And so it's not until you go to Worlds and you're on the cusp of making out of groups and then you lose that I think you really understand how much you want to advance to the next stage. And I feel like that is a thing that I would this is like my Fed and Boomer hour or whatever, is these older players, like if you're going to flame them for anything, like just flame them for being bad. Like if they were just bad, they're bad. But don't, like, I feel like we get into this, like this effort and how much they care and passionate. And I feel like that's often misguided.
Yeah. So a lot to unpack there. I agree that a lot of mentality criticism is speculation.
Yes.
Pure speculation by fans, by casters, by other teams. And that information is not going to be readily available unless you are inside the team and know exactly what's going on. That's why I think that it should be judged on an individual basis. I think loss of passion, loss of drive, those things are all very real. Mm-hmm. And you do have to balance them with the individual performance and how good this player is. I would for sure say that there is a tremendous amount of drive and you can have a lot of passion as a rookie, even if like you're saying, you haven't gotten to Worlds and lost the chance and had that crushing defeat. I could for sure see like a bright-eyed young, rookie with the drive like that just really, really wants to win and has, it's dedicating all these hours. I'm not questioning the passion or the drive on that side. I do think that it's so nuanced between some of these decisions, and people are trying to just blanket of like, all older players this and all younger players this. One example that we can bring up even from pretty recently, 2018 Cloud9, their big blow up with the community of we're benching Sneaky, we're benching Jensen, motivation issues, and everyone's just like, what the hell is going on? Like, I hate this. I know, like, and that's, there's a lot of fandom behind that, but also you have seen these players on the world stage. Yeah. So you're like, I know they are good. I know this. What are you doing in there, Reaper? And over the years, Reaper and Cloud9 have shown and proven that while they might not make every perfect decision, their process is better than a lot of people's process in getting to this stage, and the kind of how they've built up into a culmination here in 2020 of this iteration of Cloud9. So it's an interesting juxtaposition when you're like, oh yeah, we should get rid of all these older players and get some new talent in there. And then you're like, wait a second, remember that time when the Cloud9 benched all their super famous older players and they just got hard flamed and went from 7th or 8th place up to 2nd place, then went to Worlds. And I know that actually isn't that simple of a story either, because it left a lot as far as the players that did get benched were very unhappy with being benched. There was longstanding tension after being benched with the coaching staff, with organization, the way in which they did it, and the publicity behind it was all tangled.
Yes.
But
yeah.
interesting little nugget.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe next time don't meme too much about it if you're gonna do the thing that's serious, right? But I think they learned the lessons from those moments, and just one of those things that's like my main point. I saw Broxton tweet out the thing today too, was like about how the community maybe just be a little more empathetic to people, and don't like a lot of times we treat players as just stats or whatever. I think sometimes you can be critical without having to dive into personal attacks, and that is the takeaway I would like for us to have here. My last boomer index thing I would like to throw at you, and this will serve as a segue to kind of get into a few draft things I also want to ask you about, is bot lane mages. I'm going to actually say bot lane marksman. On a boomer index scale, what do you feel about bot lane marksman in particular?
As compared to bot lane mages.
So like mages, other picks, we see all mages kind of come and dominate the meta for a little bit, and they've kind of fallen off. I'm at the point where I'm not sure if they're falling off because people weren't good at them, or have they fallen off because they're not in anymore. Do you feel like, is marksman just the standard still, or are teams, do you feel like teams aren't exploring that avenue enough?
I would say marksmen are definitely the standard, because it's built into game design that way at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And in the very beginning, we didn't have, okay, there's going to be a support and going to be a bot laner and stuff. But over the years, that's the way that we've decided to go with designing the game. So I think that is definitely the standard. There is huge value in especially individual specific mage picks for the bottom, especially being paired with a player that's very comfortable on them, and keeping in mind your overall composition of the team. Now, going way too AP heavy is always very easily counterable by your opponents, so you have to be careful about doing that, and you still need your tower killing threat. May or may not need your tank killing threat, depending on what the opponent's composition is. But things like Syndra in the bottom lane, when you're going to use it specifically versus a Velios or like Heimerdinger or something, when you want to make use of a champion interaction of throwing turrets or long range stuns or something like that, is really good. Plus, I also love when you have the option in competitive play in the meta of doing kill lanes like Pantheon Talia for a while there. So I really do think marksmen are the standard, but the flavor and the highlights of the zoomer moments, I guess you want to call them, are definitely exciting, especially for when they involve kill lanes like that. But it's definitely gone to the point where they pulled back on some of the changes, so that it just didn't just go, okay, mages are the future now.
Could you have a team that is full zoomer and never plays marksman, and they are just purely kill lanes, mage lane, spot lane? Is that a strategy you think is even viable, or is it more of a change up?
I think it's definitely, you could, depending on your players. I think one of the greatest strengths of the bottom lane mages is that they are flex picks. So in your champ select, you pick it early, you switch it down to get a better matchup, and you end up with two good matchups, or just an insane matchup for your mid laner. It's definitely viable because there are plenty of marksmen that you can also play in solo lanes, like Lucian and Tristana for a long time, and those types of things. So like you can get your other damage types definitely other places. But yeah, constructing team comps involves so many levers.
So the main reason I brought that up is I wanted to touch quickly, and you guys have talked about it quite a bit, on the TSM draft in particular, where they had Fiddlestick, Syndra, I think Volibear top. It was all, and then they got kind of smushed out just because they fed Mash early. His Aphelios got way ahead, and so FlyQuest just ended up scaling as FlyQuest likes to do and destroying them. And the thing I wanted to bring up was, I can't yes, the draft probably was not good, but I did not feel like they lost specifically because of the draft. I felt like they lost because they fed Avelios 5 kills in lane early. And so then their win condition was completely destroyed. And I don't think it was a broad win condition. I felt like it was a very narrow win condition that they needed to use. They needed Lee Sin and Fiddlesticks to kind of secure advantages early just by being stronger. And then they needed to go bot and dive over and over. And that was how they were going to win the game. They needed to win it by like 30 minutes or they would just completely get outscaled. And so when you are talking, let's say on air, about who won or lost the draft, I think it's a situation where you have to account for a lot of things, right? You can't just look at it and be like, okay, this team would win at 35 minutes versus this team. So for example, the other example I heard you talk about on the dive was the Cloud9 draft against EG, where on paper at 35 minutes, sure, the EG draft completely destroys the Cloud9 draft, but that's not how the game is played, right? You don't just skip to the 35-minute mark. And so for me, when I'm looking at this TSM draft, it's not that fair to be like, oh, they just have to build MR, and then the tanks will just like shit on them, right? Because you're not going to get, you don't just start at the 35-minute mark. TSM, if they had snowballed early like Cloud9 had done against EG and were up 5K by 20 minutes, 10K by 30 minutes, they could have potentially just ended the game by being ahead. And so I'm just curious from your perspective, like when you were analyzing the draft, like what are the things that matter to you the most about which draft is better?
Yeah, it's definitely the degree to which each of these is true, because I do think that TSM draft gave them too narrow of a win condition and too little of time, because they drafted so much AP and they just are not going to have any options for killing tanks later, because it's also a tank Fiddlesticks. So
yes,
it's even going to be more difficult there. And so it's always this seesaw. Like, are you giving yourself this 10%? You have to play perfectly, snowball so hard through lane phase that you can actually have this amount of power over your team to be able to finish it out? Or is it very easy for an Ornn lane to play defensively? Very easy for a Trundle to trade farm in the jungle and not give up too many objectives and scale up for the Azir Aphelios backline. And it's the path to get there. I don't think TSM gave themselves enough an advantage in the early game that it warranted what they were letting FlyQuest do. So I think that is the big difference in the the TSM one versus like the Cloud9 EG one, where I'm like, all right, Cloud9 have tons of power, tons of early options here. Olaf even has help later for scaling, past the normal timeout period where he'd become ineffective. So it's all about these sliders rather than I think hitting, okay, this champion, great early game, because if it is really easy for the scaling team to play defensively, I know like LS talks about this a lot, where I think he has an extreme view of like, don't make any mistakes in lane. Don't, if you should be power farming your jungler. Like if the other jungler creates an opportunity, then, you have to cut out all these things. Some of the gameplay should be about forcing mistakes from your opponents. But yeah, I don't think they had enough tools to actually put that pressure on versus what the defensive options were.
Makes sense. Cool. So last thing I wanted to get to maybe this week is I did this thing with Jad a couple times last split where it's called a prop bet.
All right.
And for those of you who don't know what a prop bet, it's essentially a conditional bet in which you are given a list of options and you have to select. In Vegas, it's like any number. I think there's a minimum to it. Like it can't just be one, right? You have to pick a couple of them and they all need to come true in order for you to cash out on your bet. So what I'm going to do for Kobe is I'm going to give you 5 propositions and you need to select 3 of them, and all 3 need to come true in order for you to win your bet and cash out. So the 5 options are Immortals and Dignitas combine for 2 wins. So it could be one can go 2-0 and just carry the week for you. C9 loses a game. That's another one. Spica secures first blood in both games, and like assist counts. He doesn't need to be the one that gets to kill.
So this is just for this weekend.
Just this weekend. And then FlyQuest average game time is less than 26 minutes. And then the last one is Someday has less than 2 deaths, which means he can only die once.
All right, let me look at the schedule here, because unless Immortals and Dig are playing each other, this is going to be a really hard one to even.
They do not play each other, I can tell you that.
Okay. Well, I think I might stay away from that one. Oh, Immortals is playing Cloud9 in at least one of their games. So that's not happening. Let's see. Cloud9 loses a game. They are playing Team Liquid, so like there is a chance. At least they're playing one of the, second place contender teams.
Yes.
All right. The first one seems really rough, so I'm not choosing that. I'll take Cloud9.
Yes.
So I need 2 more.
Yes.
Okay. Spica secures first blood in both games. He has had some really good games, some off games. That one might be doable. FlyQuest average game time is less than 26 minutes. That's pretty close, because I know the fastest average game time going into last weekend was 25 minutes by TSM. So 26 is very close to.
They could lose both games quickly too, and it still counts for you. It
True.
just needs to be slower.
Okay, I'm gonna definitely take this. Someday has less than 2 deaths. I'll take that one, because that's definitely plausible. Let me look. I don't know.
He had 0 deaths last week.
They're playing CLG and TSM. That could definitely happen. Okay, yeah, and he had 0 deaths. All right, I'll do the Cloud9 one, Someday one, and then I think I'm gonna take Spica for possible first. But wait, what did I see TSM playing? All right, I'll go with Spica then, because getting an average game time of under 26 minutes seems a bit difficult too.
Yeah, okay. I think that's probably the 3 I would have picked. But I think it's just a fun little thing to think about, is like some of these conditions are a little difficult to hit.
Yeah. I don't have faith that I am going to win this prop bet.
Yes.
Get 3 of these right, but I think that's what I'll go with.
I mean, there's a pretty good chance none of those things pan out. And that's the lesson to any of you kids watching is do not gamble. The odds are stacked heavily against you.
I like it. All right, that's all the thoughts that we have for you today. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this, make sure you check out the other episodes of The Dive on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. We'll see you next time.